Hello and welcome to Luke Reads. Today we'll be reading Confessions About Colton by Olivia Harvard. The Prologue. I remember when Colton Crest disappeared. It stirred a hell of a lot of commotion. Hampton High was the worst like you would expect any high school to be. Students started rumours, teachers gave out false information, parents gossiped, some said he went to jail, others announced he was adopted. No one knew where he had gone. Not even Colton's family had a clue about their son's whereabouts. Whenever they were addressed about the issue, they dismissed it, and repeated the same monotone explanation. He was visiting relatives. But you could see the distress in Mrs. Crest's eyes, the haunting shadows that were tattooed there, as her motherly instincts told herself to prepare for the worst. When Colton's disappearance reached a month, it was still the same, despite the lack of knowledge we had about his location. None of us called the police about our concern. It was just that he was such a good bloke. He did his homework, ate his greens, and helped old ladies cross the street. He never did anything remotely stupid, so we didn't worry as much as we should have. This continued for another month, but by this time, the Crests seemed a lot calmer. They obviously had some information, but they seemed unwilling to share. This didn't particularly bother me. He was my best friend, and I trusted that he would take care of himself. If his folks were calm enough, then I should have been too. I tried convincing Lydia about this, but she refused to expect anything but the worst. I guess I couldn't really blame her. I mean, Colton and Lydia had been together since the start of high school. My parents hadn't even lasted that long. She was pretty freaked out about the whole issue though, and no matter how many times I tried to remind her that he would eventually come back, she dismissed it. Lydia got into this really unhealthy obsession with checking her phone. Whenever we were at school or just hanging out with a bunch of mates, she would just stare at the blank screen of her phone and wait for Colton to call. She was doing that exact same thing at my house when we were hanging out one Saturday afternoon. It was all the same. Lydia waited, I ate, we shared minimal interaction. It was just like any other time, until someone at the door knocked. Since she was too deep into her intense phone staring, I answered, only to find Colton standing there. "Hey," I remember him saying, "have you got beer?" I just stared at him as he shrugged off his jacket and went into the kitchen, raiding my fridge like he always did. Lydia almost passed out at the sight of him, and I would have done the same, but I was way too intrigued. The fact that he just rocked up at my place like he wasn't missing for 2 months was just freaking weird. But when we sat down on the back patio with one too many drinks, he explained that he was just with relatives. It was way too rehearsed though, an exact replica of what his parents had been saying through the period he was gone. Eventually Lydia had to go home. It took all of the effort in the world to peel her off Colton, but we finally got her to let go. He looked like he felt kind of bad over the fact that he had made his girlfriend go through hell. But another emotion dominated his regret, something cold and heartless. He didn't really look at me much, like he was way too deep into his own thoughts, that he forgot that I was even there. Occasionally he would take out of his pocket watch and check the time, as if the seconds were limited. The pocket watch was a classic piece of Colton. It was a family heirloom, probably worth more than my mum's wedding ring. It was always on its link of chains that hooked into the back belt loop of his jeans. and there wasn't a moment where he didn't have it. As soon as he pushed the watch back into his pocket, I got down to business. "Where have you been, man?" I asked him. "And quit the bull about being with family." I remember the way he smiled and tipped his bottle of beer to his lips. "Stop trying to play detective, Elliot. Some mysteries just can't be solved." I never asked him after that. I guess I didn't want to push him to a point where he'll disappear again, so I kept quiet. Although my silence was ensured, it didn't apply for the rest of the school. Questions were asked, gossip was spread, and the story of Colton's disappearance had him at the height of his high school fame. This continued all the way to the night of graduation. I took Milo for a walk that night. He had started to resemble a walking cheese ball, so some exercise was necessary. We took our usual roll at the back of our house, keeping close to the tree line of the small forest behind my neighbourhood. Then onto the street, where we made a shortcut towards the local lake. It was still early, the sun starting to disappear, but providing us with enough light to see our surroundings. As soon as we reached the sandy slice of the lake, Milo went absolutely nuts. The hair at the back of my neck stood high in alert, and he barked hysterically. At first, I thought he just saw another dog or a bird he wanted to chase. But when he started pulling me towards the water, I realised what he was so freaked about. There was a body floating in the lake. "Shit," I whispered to myself as my fingers searched my pockets for my phone. But something made me hesitate. The sinking sun's light fell upon the back pocket of the deceased jeans and reflected off a shiny surface. It was blinding for a split second, causing me to look away. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach and churned uncomfortably. I knew one object with a surface as polished as that. My hands started shaking. Milo's barks were replaced by silence, and I suddenly felt lightheaded. I forced myself to look up, to ensure my imagination was getting the better of me, but when I saw the pocket watch links, I knew it was him. I found Colton Crest dead